It's a pleasure to welcome you, and we are going to have a very special webinar today. Before we start, I would like to give you some ideas about how this is going to work. Our webinar generally takes about 2 hours. The presenter has about 40 to 50 minutes to make his presentation. Then I will call the panelists, and they will have from 5 to 10 minutes to speak. And after they finish, the presenter will answer the questions according to the order he prefers to do it. So let's start. We have the pleasure to have Dr. Robert Finkelstein today. He has an extensive CV. He's president of the Robotic Technology Company and is from the University of Maryland. Okay. The title of his talk is From Artificial Intelligence to Artificial Wisdom. The theme encompasses several definitions, perspectives, and possibilities of performing. You have the word, Professor Finkelstein.
Okay. Okay, everybody sees the presentation okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to point out the email address. So anyone who wants a copy of this presentation, if you email me, I will send you a copy. It occurred to me after working with AI for a long time, and when I say a long time, I started in a previous millennium working with AI way back at near the beginning. I wasn't quite there at the very beginning, but near the beginning. And AI was quite different than it is now. It consisted of a variety of different techniques and tools and so on. It did not have the capabilities of the large language models, which depend on deep neural networks because of the advances in technology that have occurred in the last 20 years in hardware and software. And the progress in the technology is accelerating. And by the end of the century, AI will be embedded everywhere. It'll be ubiquitous. It'll be within robots and autonomous machines everywhere. And it's going to change everything. In any event, it occurred to me that looking at what AI is and does, while it is very successful in many cases, it needed something else. It needed the ability to see the bigger picture than it typically focuses on. The purpose of this presentation is to describe the need for this transformational concept of artificial wisdom. Artificial wisdom does not replace AI. It includes AI. It's integrated with AI. And I'm going to show it at the end towards the end of the presentation, the an architecture, not the architecture necessarily, but an example of an architecture that could produce artificial wisdom. And I'm also going to provide a bunch of use cases for military and civil applications. With artificial wisdom integrated with artificial intelligence, I think it will be a step towards artificial general intelligence, which is the major goal of a lot of the researchers in AI. Artificial general intelligence, AGI, would be something that either is as good as human intelligence or superior to human intelligence. Now, it is very difficult to define intelligence for humans or organisms, never mind machines. But many decades ago, when I was doing extensive work with the National Institute Standards and Technology in the US, we defined for our purposes a definition. We provided a definition of artificial intelligence, which is on this slide. And it's simply the ability to act appropriately. And then we define what appropriate means. That which maximizes the probability the system will successfully achieve its mission goals. Now, what are the mission goals? Well, for organisms, any organism, whether animals, plants, whatever, any organism needs sufficient intelligence to at least achieve nature's prime directive, which is to survive long enough to reproduce. Of course, human beings and other organisms might have other mission goals other than surviving and reproducing, but that is nature's prime directive, and every single organism has sufficient intelligence to accomplish that. So we define a wise system differently than an intelligent system. A wise system, in a metaphorical definition, can perceive both the forest and the trees. So it includes a broad understanding, which is the forest, as well as attention to detail. Now, there are many, definitions of what wisdom is. Homo sapiens, is wise, means wise man. So, whether true or not, but anyway, so his wise system makes a judgment or decision, not just to accomplish an immediate goal or to satisfy some narrow objective, but also has to contemplate what the larger consequences might be of that decision or action that it might autonomously produce. AI, as it says here, is excellent at micro tasks, but misses this big picture. All right, so that the judgment of a wise system, which would, again, include AI, it would be both precise and holistic. And I coined a word, prolistic, to mean both precise and holistic for the wisdom, for the artificial wisdom. So it would be a transformational system, both for military and civil use. The first use cases that I looked at were for the military because the source of funding to produce a proof of concept system might be easier to get from the military, from the Department of Defense, rather than from a civil entity. All right, so unlike the current AI systems, which are optimized for speed, prediction, or control, a wise AI would reason with context, foresee consequences, and balance competing interests, and apply nuanced judgment. So decision-making should be improved across all the operational, tactical, strategic levels that the military engages in. And in particular, the system would be adaptable to changes in the environment, in the bigger picture involving, say, civilian presence, the rules of engagement, and so on. Things that might change, including the warfighter fatigue in the course of time engaged in combat. So the wise AI in particular would include ethical implications more deeply than the current AI systems, many of which don't worry about ethical considerations at all. This is a very big area where there's constant concern about the lack of guardrails, constraints, behavioral constraints on AI, and the notion of ethics and rules and laws applying to AI, where the AI knows what these things are, is something that's very important and which the wisdom would impart. So in an example of a small unit, you could have an infantry squad, 9 to 12 soldiers. So there's a use case or an example here where there's a night patrol with confirmed insurgent activities. All right, a drone, friendly drone, spots an armed figure moving around between buildings, and ordinarily a squad would engage and start firing at this individual who looked to be a threat. But the AI would look at the bigger picture. What are the actual rules of engagement at this time? Where are the civilians? And because of this, looking at this bigger picture, the wise AI would suggest not immediate engagement, but postponing engagement for a bit, maybe to do a flanking maneuver, maybe to do some other activities as indicated on the chart to prevent killing civilians and causing civilians to hate your forces because of that. All right, and also ideally, you want to have a de-escalation of the conflict, of the war, and each little step which prevents unneeded death and casualties is another little step towards a de-escalation. And you want to have long-term counterinsurgency goals to accomplish, and wise AI takes that into account as well. And stepping up from a squad, you go to an infantry platoon, 3 or 4 squads. And in this particular example, a platoon needs to hold a strategic checkpoint on a mountain pass. And there's suddenly a fog rolls in. Visibility is very limited, but there are enemy drones that are detected. So ordinarily, an AI would recommend holding the position, waiting for orders. But the wise AI would look at the bigger picture, the weather forecast and enemy patterns and so on, and suggest a repositioning of the forces slightly, and the ability to coordinate with adjacent units, and in other words, avoid an ambush, conserve your electronic warfare assets against drones, and so on. So there's an ability here um, to protect the friendly forces, but in a way that allows for longer term benefits as well. And the same when you go up one more step to a company, which is 3 to 5 platoons, and there's sniper fire. The company is engaged in a peacekeeping mission. It's not engaged in supposed to be in active combat, but a peacekeeping mission. There's sniper fire near a marketplace. And the marketplace, of course, is very important to the civilians, both economically and in terms of being able to get food and other supplies. And instead of returning fire like an AI would suggest, the artificial wisdom takes into account the bigger picture, the broad political impact of engaging right away, shooting at the suspected sniper. All right, disrupting the marketplace might turn the local civilians against the peacekeeping forces, and so the artificial wisdom suggests doing something that allows for the friendly forces to maintain good relations with the civilians, avoiding disrupting the market, and maintains the civil trust in the military for the peacekeeping mission. And so, as a summary, small units with artificial wisdom gain this tactical agility without ethical or strategic blindness. And so you can take care of immediate problems. It doesn't ignore, the AAW will not ignore the immediate problem. You've got to do something to protect your friendly forces. Doesn't ignore that. But on the other hand, it looks also to try to benefit the future and long-term consequences. So one thing that's also important is that artificial wisdom, unlike much of artificial intelligence, not all artificial intelligence, much of it, AW is explainable. And so it can provide insight. It can explain why it made a certain decision. Large language models, which are based on deep neural networks, cannot, because neural networks in general cannot explain themselves. Expert systems, rule-based systems, which are part of AI, they can explain themselves. And other types of AI can explain themselves, but not large language models based on neural networks. So also artificial wisdom with embedding it into AI would also bring civilian and societal benefits, long-term ethical and public interest outcomes in society. So I have a series of use cases in the presentation as examples of what AW, artificial wisdom, might accomplish. In this case, we're talking about healthcare. All right, and you have to worry not only about individual patients, but also the healthcare of society as a whole, including things like equitable healthcare among the entire population, including underserved people, poor people, and disadvantaged groups, as well as the biological aspects, such as microbial resistance. You have to avoid that. Access to health care by all groups, side effects, things of this sort. So the artificial wisdom has a triage system during a pandemic, for example, would balance the immediate survival of individuals with long-term public health goals. In the case of urban planning and transportation, likewise, you want not just to increase the speed of traffic flow, but you have to also be concerned with pedestrian safety, equitable outcomes for the area as a whole, the city as a whole, in terms of avoiding disadvantaged population, increasing the disadvantage to disadvantaged populations. You want to also worry about the environmental consequences of emissions. You want to avoid gentrification to the point where there's population displacement and people are forced to leave the city. So AW, artificial wisdom, implements not just traffic signal optimization, but also ensures equitable wait times for the population, equitable outcomes in terms of avoiding injury, avoiding environmental adverse consequences like knocking down wholesale neighborhoods to improve traffic. Another use case is environmental policy and resource management. And again, you have to look at the bigger picture, not just solve the immediate problem, micro problem, but you want to have the macro consequences considered as well. So you've got to look at the ecosystem integrity, biodiversity, intergenerational justice. In other words, what's going to be around for future generations, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so on, if you do certain things currently. You're going to cause longer-term extinctions, certain species, degradation of the environment. You want to have the future sustainable. In other words, as it says, AW trades present utility for sustainable futures. And you want to reduce the risk of irreversible environmental harm. And for example, with water allocation systems, there are current agricultural needs for water, which is getting more and more difficult because the underground water is being reduced at a rapid rate. And the weather is changing, and there's local droughts that are getting worse and worse. And so you need to balance the current agricultural needs, the production of food currently to feed the population at reasonable cost, with long-term aquifer health and downstream ecosystem services, like for ensuring the survival of salmon that need streams to swim up to be able to reproduce. Criminal justice and policing is another example use case where the AW might focus on individuals such as risk scores, bail decisions, daily patrol allocations, and so on. But you need to have the bigger picture being considered, where the system might suggest various kinds of social support for individuals or groups of individuals in order to prevent crimes into the future, in order to achieve a better relationship between law enforcement and the population that it serves. Another use case is education, and there's a lot of focus on improving the performance of individuals, the metrics associated with individual performance, but also individuals need to be able to do critical thinking, need to have civic competence, to know something about how the society works and voting and what the dangers are, especially now with AI and having and its ability to both disseminate misinformation and disinformation very widely and believably. And so education, the need for education is changing. Artificial wisdom can encompass the big picture while not ignoring the needs of individual students. Likewise, getting into corporate matters, product strategy, roadmap prioritization. The AI often optimizes short-term metrics like market share, revenue, but there are long-term harms which then get created by focusing on the short-term metrics, like customer churn and regulatory risk. So the artificial wisdom would take the big picture into account and simulate multi-year scenarios, look at things like retention of customers versus the monetization of choices and product trade-offs. So with artificial wisdom, you'd want a higher, longer-term retention of customers, reduced regulatory remediation costs, and so on, and product pivots that would be necessary because of missteps in focusing on the short term. So AW would recommend actions that balance the product key performance indicators with the strategic goals that the company should have, even if it doesn't. Another use case involves credit and risk decision-making, finance and lending. Likewise, where individuals want to borrow money, they may have a higher risk than is currently deemed to be satisfactory and therefore turned down for loans, for business loans or personal loans. But there might be, if you look at the bigger picture, reasons to take a prudent risk and give somebody a loan. The borrower's lifetime behavior, if approved versus being denied a loan, can be very important, not just to the individual, but to the relationship with the company that's providing the loan. And you multiply that by thousands or millions of clients. So there are lower long-term defaults, improved compliance, better customer outcomes, and an excellent reputation for the lender in the long term. Another example is human resources within the corporation, hiring, promotion, retention. There's a lot of use of AI now in hiring and in people applying for jobs. And my looking at it personally is that much of the AI is really not artificial intelligence, but artificial stupidity. Whoever's responsible for it anyway is caused AI to become stupid in its selection process. And certainly even AI that is not so bad can be improved with artificial wisdom, where it can balance the short-term roles with individuals' long-term career goals, with the corporation or the organization's need in the long term for leadership and for quality personnel, longer succession planning, long-term retention, reduced risk of bias and discrimination. AI currently, much of it has inherent bias, either intentionally or unintentionally. AW would avoid this bias. Another example is market pricing and strategy. The AW could propose pricing paths and communication strategies that would trade a short-term sales lift for sustainable profit margin and reputation. So it's looking not just for the short term, let's have a sale. Let's have a sale now. Let's have a sale next week, and so on. Customers can get used to these sales, and when the price goes back to what it should be, where the company can actually make some kind of a profit, the customers then balk at buying anything. So AW, artificial wisdom, can determine price promotions that maximize both the immediate return and the longer term sustainability and customer loyalty. So how is all this done? Well, I have looked at several potential architectures in which the software could achieve artificial wisdom. And this is one such architecture. Excuse me. So the modules contain the software, which is the source of the artificial wisdom. The AI itself is not included here. The AI is integrated, a separate architecture with the AW architecture. There's a teaming between the AW and the AI. So at the top, we have data input, a variety of databases, knowledge bases, containing different kinds of input. Basic, knowledge of large scale knowledge, the world's a book, library, excuse me, and real-time data from things that are happening currently, laws, policies, regulations, scenarios, and so on. Knowledge of customs, norms, and current human sources, user profiles, and so on. So all that is at the top. So perception is the first thing that happens. We have to transform data and sensed information and extract it into perception. And the raw inputs are used by both the precision and holistic processes that are part of this architecture. So we have what's called a precision layer, and it includes the predictive models, which are here, right below the perception. And they provide the estimates for the relatively short time horizon. Excuse me. You have, as example, tactical risk, product demand, medical diagnoses, whatever your application use cases are. And that occurs down here. And you have below that the local reasoner. All right. And the local reasoner is a rule engine that is involved with constraints for safety. In other words, the guardrails that prohibit the system from doing something dangerous or harmful. You have what are also called soft constraints, such as preferences, short-term fairness, quotas, and so on. And the local reasoner is over here. Part of the holistic layer is value judgment, which is on this part of the diagram. And you have input from stakeholders, stakeholder preferences, legal constraints, and the scenario and input and futures engine all goes into the value judgment module. The value judgment module, in turn, goes down here. And what's happening is that it produces robustness metrics. The value judgment also has, I think I mentioned before, the stakeholder groups, priorities, preferences, all this coming in here and going down there. The strategic planner is over here, makes policy recommendations, allocates resources, optimized for multi-objective criteria over long periods, and that goes down into here. And this is where we get into orchestration and governance. The decision mediator is a fusion engine that takes the candidate actions from the precision layer and the holistic layer candidate decisions. In other words, there may be several potential decisions that are generated, and the decision mediator resolves any conflicts between the precision layer and the holistic layer, and is going to determine a single decision for the current issue that it's considering. So the deliberation and explanation log, which is over here, the decision maker is going into that, records inputs, intermediate representation, trade-offs, and so on. The human oversight and user interface is over here, and this is for the post hoc analysis and for the human to determine that the processes that the architecture is doing are appropriate, proper, and it's not about to do something harmful. The decision maker finally goes into the action and holistic, and then there's a holistic justification for it. The action that's either suggested or autonomously implemented by the system occurs down here. Oh, and let me emphasize that this is not the architecture, but an architecture. There could be others. We haven't really settled on a final version to implement with a proof of concept as yet. So, in conclusion, AI can provide society with enormous benefits into the future, how we live, work, and play, where we live, where we work, where we play. But it can also cause great harm to individuals, society, and the earth itself. So AI needs artificial wisdom. All right. So to both make sure that the decisions are the best that can be at any given time, and that the future for individuals, for society, for the environment are the best that they can be. AI needs AW to see both the forest and the trees, to be both precise and holistic, and to use my made up word, prolistic. This nuclear explosion is just a representation of a great many different ways that AI can cause an existential disaster for humankind and for the planet as a whole. Okay, do we have any questions?
Okay, thank you very much. Let's call Christian Bankov. I will need you to unmute. Okay. Professor Christian Bankov is a professor of semiotics at the New Bulgarian University and is also editor-in-chief of Digital Age in Semiotics and Communication.
Thank
Please.
you, Professor Finkelstein, for your presentation, which was really insightful. Now, what, let's say, encouraged me to enter in this discussion actually is the problem of judgment, which obviously is a core thing in your idea of artificial wisdom. I would say that integrating human-like levels of judgment within the artificial intelligence transforms the AI as we know it and as we practice it now, the small scale and let's say detailed task helper to the artificial wisdom, which is the big picture. So can the big picture be really achieved? I mean, can artificial wisdom making kind of important decisions making within the big picture, is this possible? Now, I worked time ago. Actually, it was also one of my first publications was about judgment, whether judgment was a purely human capacity. I was actually following Immanuel Kant, Kantian philosophy. So I would insist, but this is for the sake of the dialogue, of course, that somehow it seems to me impossible thing to implement what we call judgment, the human capacity to subsume the abstract knowledge to the concrete situation. This is according to Kant, the judgment. This thing is, for me, a problem to imagine it how the artificial systems, even the more sophisticated ones, can reproduce. And let me enlarge a bit the argument of Kant. Kant is saying, okay, everyone can learn a lot about any possible matter, and then it's completely different story when it comes to um, subsume the reality, the big variety of what is going on out there, how our abstract rational knowledge to be applied out there. He says this is exactly the judgment. He says everyone can learn a lot, but then the one's capacity to subsume the abstract to the concrete is his own. And he says, I call stupidity exactly the many people not being able to judge. They can be perfect scholars in, I don't know, in law or in physics or in whatever scientific matter, and they can have all the rules in their minds. But he said the judgment is exactly the capacity to apply, to subsume, to realize the real situation and then to apply this thing. Now, can artificial intelligence be this transcendental? He calls it the transcendental judgment. So, can artificial intelligence substitute humans in this very existential moment of the transcendental judgment? According to me, who is doing the judgment in the AI thing actually is the programmer, the developer, the one who decides at the moment of design of the system, and then this judgment is delegated to the machine, to the next steps. But the real decision is taken by the developer, by the team of developers, by the human actors who are behind. And then the machine starts to make its decisions, but these decisions are kind of vicarious decisions. They're not real. There is no stupidity in the machine, or you said artificial intelligence, as we know, it's stupid. Yes, it's stupid because the tasks are sometimes very mechanical, sometimes very predictable. So to get the wisdom, can we get wisdom without the transcendental judgment? Or can finally we find the algorithm to delegate the real transcendental judgment to the machine? This is where my reflections goes, and I would be really pleased to hear how you comment on this.
Okay. Many decades ago.
Professor Finkelstein, please, we are going to hear all of the panelists and you answer at the end. Thank you very much. So let's hear now Fuad Hamidi. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. He is a professor from the University of Maryland in Baltimore, from the Department of Information Systems.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. So my commentary or question is coming from a concern around the narratives surrounding AI and the allure, what I call like the seduction of AI, and more broadly, technology that's become a big a part of our narratives currently, both in the US and also worldwide. And you alluded to them in your presentation, which I appreciate that. And the concerns that trying to apply AI to a lot of very complex issues and often kind of replacing the problem, the very complex socio-technical problem of making decisions that impact, for example, the environment or equity, issues of equity or issues in society, with an issue of problem solving, which I think is to some extent true, but from my perspective, I feel like a lot of times the issue is not so much in, or the solution is not so much in a technological approach, including ways of kind of holistically looking at issues from a purely technological perspective. but having the political will to also act on issues that we already know some of the solutions to. So, for example, environmental issues and so on. And I want to also kind of talk a little bit and bring attention to the many concerns about AI that have been addressed or raised in the community. And I would say the Atlas of AI by Kate Crawford would provide a good overview around, for example, environmental impact. Around societal impact that AI models, both the infrastructure and the applications are kind of generating currently. And I'm curious to hear how the proposed model of artificial wisdom is going to address that, because I hear some of the same narrative around techno-solutionism kind of present in that notion. And I'm wondering, like how, and I did notice the notion of stakeholder input, which I do appreciate in your presentation, but it seemed like more of a model, a feature of a model, rather than actually kind of ongoing conversation with people who might be impacted by the technology or the technological approaches there. So I would appreciate in kind of in summary, a more clear discussion around how the proposed approach is not another name basically for AI, how increasing the scope is fundamentally making a difference to the issues that exist with AI, and how is it different from the ongoing, for example, and substantial work that is being done in the field of AI fairness, AI accountability, AI transparency, and is encountering very complex issues that might be very difficult to solve from a technological perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear now Konstantinos Mikos. He is from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank you again for your talk, Dr. Finkelstein. I must admit, there are many thoughts that came to my mind during your talk. I want to narrow it down to two questions. The first one is that I liked the part of the definition you presented in the beginning about AI, not wisdom, artificial intelligence, that it's about maximizing the probability to successfully achieve its mission. And I was wondering that small parts in the definition also required a definition by itself. I mean, what successfully actually means? It is a matter of perspective. In your examples, especially, let's say, the military scenarios, it was about perspective. For example, the initial mission that we give to an AI could be ensure victory for our army. But if it was to have also a greater picture, it should be able to say that, no, I see the probabilities are not as favorable as they were in the beginning, so I'm trying not to ensure victory, but to ensure survivability of our soldiers. And I'm thinking that maybe the key to bridge this intelligence and wisdom would be to allow the AI to change its goals by itself, to, let's say, reprogram itself in this part. I don't know if this is feasible. I don't know if it is somehow incorporated in your architecture, but this would be my first question. What is your thoughts about allowing the AI, which seems to be very good at many other tasks, to handle its goals by itself? Maybe it can do it better than we can do, which somehow resembles, I think, the question Dr. Bankov said about the developers. Now, this brings me to the second question. How secure do we feel in allowing the AI to choose its goals? And most importantly, I'm not talking about the dystopic scenarios that maybe can go rogue or become destructive or something like that. I believe that You said there are security switches inside the architectures. I'm pretty certain we can shut it off if something like that happens. But I was wondering how ready we are to accept that maybe the AI is better in handling this task if it can see the whole picture and work towards ensuring the survivability, the benefit of everyone. Maybe that would mean that certain parts, certain people will lose something in order for the whole of society to gain. And I was wondering, what is your opinion on that as well? How ready we are to allow something like that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now let's hear Mr. Panchanan Mohanty. I can see his, okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, Professor Finkelstein's presentation was very impressive and it's futuristic. But you know, as both the previous speakers have mentioned, let me tell you, in India, a lot of my friends talked about machine learning. And within 3-4 years, they started talking about deep learning. Now they are talking about large language models, LLMs. Here, you know, it's a problem. Problem is most languages are low resourced. And none of the Indian languages, including Hindi, you know, doesn't have a large, corpus. So, you know, now the issue is when you don't have a large corpus, and now here, of course, I would request a definition of what is large. Let's have some kind of approximation what we mean by large here, because I know the data I deal with, scholars who work on Hindi, I work on my mother tongue Odia and certain other languages, and we find that the data we have is not sufficient to build a model that will be robust. So that is the issue, number one. Number two, you know, again, AI is the buzzword in Odia in India for the last, 1 year or so. Even I must mention here that recently there is a film on Mahabharata, that epic, old Indian epic. There is a film where the advertisement is that, AI has helped, this is produced with the help of AI, that kind of thing. It is, everybody is talking about AI in this country. The issue here is, of course, AW is, as I mentioned, very, very impressive. The problem will be when we talk about, of course, Professor Finkelstein mentioned that AI is likely to or will erode diversity. That is something which is extremely important, because the moment diversity is very important. And since I come from the linguistics background, I must mention that he also talked about biodiversity. And as UNESCO has been emphasizing for decades, biodiversity will survive if and only if linguistic diversity survives, because we know the environment in our mother tongues. So mother tongues, are very important. So biodiversity will survive if and only if linguistic diversity survives. So that is one important. He also talked about critical thinking. There is a lot of research all over the world, especially in the Western world, that bilingualism and multilingualism helps in building critical thinking capabilities. There have been many experiments to show that, especially the students from America, I can mention, since he is from University of Maryland, that bilinguals have better cognitive abilities than monolingual American students, senior students. So that kind of thing. So the last point that I would mention is that I worked on machine translation for about 15, 20 years, and it was never very successful because of the world knowledge. When you talk about translation, I'm sure everybody has seen that the same text has been translated by 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 people. The Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali has been translated most probably by 18 people into one language, Telugu, where the state in which I am staying, living now. So, and why then, how will the machine would help, or how will this AW help in all these activities? This is what I would like to know, Professor Finkelstein. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have another panelist, but I don't see him here, who Manish Fuyal. So I think we are going to go ahead, and Mr. Finkelstein, you can answer your questions, please.
Okay. As I mentioned previously, been working on AI for many decades, back the previous century, the previous millennium. And in particular, worked with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which developed an architecture for their system that's extremely fundamental and very good. And from the beginning, in that architecture was what was called the value judgment module. And that value judgment module was the module that contained ethics, rules, laws, and so on. Everything was crammed into that one module. In my artificial wisdom architecture, I separated out these kinds of data into different sections, the laws, regulations in one place, current sensory information in another place, and so on. But the value judgment module concept, simple as it seems, is something that's missing from much of current AI. There is not any place within the AI, not all AI, and there is an effort now to make these changes, but you need something that's going to constrain behavior. All right, how do you look at the bigger picture, the holistic picture, in terms of what's going to be in the future? Well, the NIST architecture was designed initially to control robots or vehicles or machines, autonomous intelligent machines. And in order to look into the future in terms of planning, to be able to plan, the system simulated. That is, it made a series of simulations to look at what might be possible. And that's how it did its forecasting. And a simulation that was the most reasonable is the one that could be selected. So that if you want to look at an environmental consequence of taking some action, you could simulate, or the system could simulate, hundreds, maybe thousands of different models as to what are the consequences of taking this action, with a whole bunch of if-then possibilities. And so that's one way of doing it. It's not it's not a perfect system, because nothing can really know what's going to happen in the future, because lightning could strike or a meteor could hit the earth at any point. but it's a way of improving the process. All right. And in terms of, I think somebody mentioned autonomy. Autonomy and trust are big issues. There's a lot of work being done to improve the trust in AI or in the ability of systems to operate autonomously. And I looked at this myself. I have a white paper on metrics for trust. In other words, if you achieve these metrics, then you'd be able to trust the system. And again, if anybody's interested in engaging in a conversation with me, you've got my email address. Send me an email. I'll be happy to engage in the conversation with you. There's also the notion of transparency and explainability, which is another area of effort with AI, because without a system being able to explain itself, it's difficult for people to trust it, especially if they don't understand why a decision was made. And excuse me. So we've looked at the issue of trust. We've looked at the issue of autonomy in some detail. What else? One disadvantage of having everybody go one after the other is trying to remember what they were saying. But if somebody gives me a hint as to another topic, I can go on with it. What else should I be addressing?
Are there other questions, please?
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't, I'm pretty sure I didn't address all these issues here. But I mean, basically, in terms of actually achieving artificial wisdom, it's not something to be done overnight. Just like artificial intelligence has been around for, 60, 70 years. And it's going to take some time. But is there some other? Wait a minute. Here's.
There's a question by Konstantinos. Are we ready to accept?
I see. Okay. Well, the issue of what you accept from AI depends upon what the question is and what the situation is. AI can do very well in well-defined situations for which it's been trained. And as you know, you have this software that operates seemingly autonomously, but there are tens of thousands of people, human beings all over the world, currently working to train the AI. The AI doesn't just wake up intelligent. It requires human beings to train it. And that training is going to go on for a while. For certain applications or use cases, the AI might be quite complete. And in terms of what it knows, in terms of its recommendations. For other cases, not complete. Autonomous vehicles, for example, which are cars and trucks and buses and so on, which have AI embedded in them, have not yet, in general, achieved what's called level 5, which is complete autonomy under all normal circumstances where humans would drive a car, or better than humans driving a car. There are limited cases where cars are completely autonomous, but not in a general case of anytime, anywhere yet. It will happen. They're gradually improving, but it will happen. And likewise, for other sorts of cases, can we have an AI that's a physician replace completely a human physician? Perhaps in certain cases now, not in other cases, but this current century is about a quarter of the way through. So you got a while to go before the end of the century. But by the end of the century, I feel confident that AI is going to be ubiquitous. There's going to be robot doctors, robot lawyers, robot barbers, robot housekeepers, maybe robot spouses. Anything is going to be possible between now and the end of the century. But you don't want to reduce complexity. Let me see. Okay. Well, sometimes problems are seemingly complex because the problems are actually solutions to other problems. I learned this in sociology courses I've taken many years ago, with many examples of these cases. Sometimes what seemingly complex problem can be decomposed into something simpler and justifiably decomposed. In other words, it's not a forced decomposition where you're now throwing things away and the solution will be incomplete because you've thrown things away. I think that technological solutions are often double-edged swords. If you go through history, you find that the greatest invention of all time was probably the first, the sharpened stone tool, which allowed early humans before Homo sapiens, like 3 million years ago, to cut away meat from dead animals before the predators or the scavengers like hyenas would show up and chase the humans away. I mean, if you didn't have a tool to cut away meat, how are you going to, carry this carcass away? So that enabled a greater diet of protein, the ability of the brain to grow larger, of better nourishment, so on. But that sharpened stone tool was also a weapon and allowed humans to kill other humans more easily, as well as to protect themselves from predators, other creatures that may want to eat them. all through history, technology has shown advantages and disadvantages. So there's nothing new with AI in terms of being a double-edged sword, uh, do where it can do good and where it can do bad. Um, but I think uh, technological solutions to problems have also worked over time. How does machine translation system? Well, um, if you're talking about machine language translation, um, I did not address that directly, and it's not a translation system per se. AW incorporates AI, and AI systems are doing translation. And so, presumably, if you have a good translator that's part of the AI, could be incorporated into the AW. I'm not advocating the AW to do anything different with language translation.
Okay. Do you have any further remarks?
Raising a hand, but seems that this is not the model. Do you hear me? Uh, do you hear me, Professor Finkelstein?
Okay. Pardon me, I didn't get that.
Okay. I wanted just to ask you a few more words on the value judgment model.
Right.
And
By the way, if anybody would like a copy of the government report that contains a great deal of detail on the autonomous intelligent control system architecture that was developed over decades at a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars, okay, from at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and was tested, implemented in a variety of vehicles, military and civil vehicles, over time. In other words, it was demonstrating autonomous vehicles many decades ago, before the automotive companies decided that it might be a good idea to develop autonomous vehicles. I was involved in a program, by the way, sponsored by the Department of Defense for 10 years, called the Intelligent Vehicle Technology Transfer Program. The idea was to transfer the technology which was advanced in the Department of Defense to the civil sector, to the automotive companies. But the first problem was to convince the automotive companies that they should be developing autonomous cars and autonomous trucks. There was no belief, no sense of wanting to do that, except in maybe a few laboratories at places like General Motors and so on. Daimler-Benz was the most advanced in terms of appreciating what autonomous vehicles can do, and they were driving autonomous or having autonomous cars, Mercedes Benzes, driving on the Autobahn back in the 1990s. All right. They didn't do everything, but they were quite advanced back then. So anyway, I wanted to say that if anybody wants a copy of this document, of which I was one of many authors, I'll be happy to send a digital copy to you if you give me a request via email.
Thank you very much for your talk, for your remarks. I want to thank you and all the panelists who participated, and also a special thanks to Paul Wissac, who organized this webinar, and to Zignew, who gave us a technical support. Any other comment? Otherwise, I wish you happy holidays until next year.
Okay, happy holidays to everybody.